The Michael Berry Show.
Welcome to the program, the great and powerful Ray Wylie Hubbard on his 79th birthday. Happy birthday, my friend.
Oh, thank you, man. Michael, how are you? It's been a while.
It's been a while. How are you? How are you doing? It's your birthday.
Well, I'm probably doing better than I deserve, as they say.
I should have looked this up, but remind me, is it Soper, Oklahoma?
Soper, Oklahoma. Yeah, that's where I was raised. I was born in Hugo, Oklahoma, which was known as Circus Town, USA back in the 50s and 60s, where all these circuses made their winter home. And then we moved to Soper, and then we moved to Dallas, Oak Cliff when I was 8 years old. Went to high school there and got a little folk group there at W.H. Adamson, Michael Murphy. I saw him perform in an assembly, and I went, oh, man, I got to get a guitar. So that's where it kind of all started.
And everybody has their first guitar story. It's usually somebody bought it for them as a gift, but how did yours come about?
Well, I think my mom bought me one, and I went and learned Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley, and Delia's Gone.
Oh,
wow. And then I think I learned Peter Gunn, the theme from Peter Gunn. Da, 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 da,
yeah. Well, how about that? And how did you learn it? I mean, you just had the book and you picked at it?
No, they didn't have that back then. You would have to listen. You would listen. You put it. They had the record player, and you'd have to pick. You'd listen to it, and you pick the needle up and put it back over it till you could hear the lick.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was. There wasn't any YouTube or anything. You had to, like I say, pick up the needle and put it back at the start and learn that lick, and just keep doing it till you finally figured it out.
When I was in about third grade, my brother was in seventh grade, and he got a guitar, and he was musically inclined. He played the trumpet. And as I said, he was musically inclined and I wasn't. And he would sit in his room, which was right next to mine, and the doors were hollow. So I'd put my ear to it, and then I'd burst in and make fun of him. But he'd sit in there, peas, 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 peas. He was learning his chords, and he would sing along to it, eating goober peas. And so I've told that story on the air, and apparently a lot of people learned to play the guitar to that.
That was it. Yeah, you just, you didn't, we couldn't afford to go to take music lessons or anything. And so, you get that old mail-baked chord book and you play till your fingers hurt and you quit and you go back and you play it again,
And so take me from there. You buy the first guitar and then what happens?
Well, then I got a little folk group in high school called, with two guys, Rick and Wayne, and we had a little folk group. And then we got a gig in Red River, New Mexico, which at a barbecue joint. So we got on a bus in Dallas, and 28 hours later, we got off in Questa. And we go to this barbecue joint, and the guy says, well, boys, besides playing at night, one of you's going to wrap potatoes in tinfoil, one of you's going to mop, one of you's going to wash dishes. So that was our big-time professional gig. Now, then that next year, the banjo player and I, we left, and we went up to Colorado. And it was just the two of us. And what we would do about 6 o'clock at night, we'd find a cafe like in Breckenridge or Grand Junction or, wherever. And we about 6 o'clock, he'd strap on a banjo and I'd put on a guitar. And we'd walk in the front door playing Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And all of a sudden he would stop and he'd go, I'm Rick. This is Ray. We're the Self-Righteous Brothers. And that's still a good name for a band.
It's a great name for a band.
And then they say, and we'd wonder if we could play some songs for a hamburger and a place to stay. And go back in the fall. Usually the owner would come out. And some guy would say, I'll buy him a burger. And then so we went all through Colorado that summer when we were, I guess, 18 years old doing that. And a couple of, there was a time we slept in a laundromat. But, it was fun. That's what we did, And then after that, I just kept playing and ran into Austin doing that whole progressive country scare with Wylie and Jerry Jeff, Michael Murphy, and just got into writing, So
he wasn't Michael Martin Murphy back then. He was just Michael Murphy.
He was actually he was a senior at Adamson High School, and I was a sophomore. And he may not like me telling this, but he was a cheerleader.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and he was famous and in high school, and he was just. And he came out on stage one time and said, this is a song I wrote. And all of a sudden I went, songwriter, wow, So, he was very instrumental in getting me
Corey
started
Morrow
in that.
was a cheerleader at Memorial High, or at Stratford High School, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I didn't
Hey,
know
I
that.
just
Yeah.
looked, so I wouldn't ask any dumb questions, or fewer, but it says you went to high school with B.W. Stevenson.
Yep. He was. I was a sophomore, and he was a freshman back then. And then after high school, BW went into the Air Force and was stationed up in Wichita Falls. And I had a little apartment there in Denton, and he would come down on the weekend, and we would learn guitar chords and play and everything. And and then he went out to California with us and hung out. So
I just
BW.
heard my Maria 2 days ago. I was pulling up to see my dad at the old folks' home, and I'm pulling up, and I'm pulling into my spot, and my Maria comes on, and I pulled in and sat there. I call that a driveway listener when you listen to the radio this way. And I had to listen to the end of that. And, the original version, his version, I think that's such a good song.
Well, he was just, we went out to California. I was at my little folk group. We had a gig out there at the Ice House in Pasadena. And BW went out there, and he rode out there with us. And all of a sudden, we were staying with an actor friend of ours, Royce Applegate, up in the Hollywood Hills. And BW said, I'm going to go out and see what's out there. And he left. 2 weeks later, he came back and said, I wrote these songs. I said, sing me one. So he sang Highway 1. And I said, sing me another one. Maybe you just got lucky. And then he sang I Feel Like a Baby Boy on My Own, Baby Boy Being Born. And, man, he was just off and running, He was a great cat, incredible voice, great songwriter.
I don't think it's accidental how often you see these guys, whether it's the great American writers in Paris in the 20s, or you see these guys that they create a kind of a cabal, a little collective, and it becomes sort of a fraternity, and they're playing off of each other and encouraging each other and competing against each other. The Beatles versus the Beach Boys, and I think that seems to be a very common trend. I mean, I wonder if Michael Murphy, or Michael Martin Murphy as we call him, hadn't done that, if you'd be where you are today.
Probably not. I feel very fortunate. I started off in folk music, and you find Peter, Paul, and Mary. Then through them you find Dylan. Then you find Woody Guthrie. Then you find Cisco Houston and all that. But at that same time, when I was, getting into it, all of a sudden, man, you had Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt and Billy Joe Shaver and Willie and Jerry Jeff and all these guys, and there wasn't really any big ego thing. I mean, Jerry Jeff was a great songwriter, but he would always include a song by an unknown young songwriter on his album, Gary Dunn or, Guy Clark or me, so it was just really was a fellowship of these guys learning and from each other and caring. I remember Rusty Weir was a big shot, and I was supposed to open for him at some club, and we had a flat, so I called the club and said, hey, man, I don't think open. Rusty said, it doesn't matter, I'll go on first. There wasn't any big ego about top billing. He said, yeah, I'll go on first, which means I had to follow Rusty Weir, but you know what I mean? There really were just very gracious cats working with each other.
There's a group of those guys. Some of them have left us. Was Stephen Fromholz part of that fraternity?
Yeah, Stephen Fromholz. Yeah, Steve Fromholz. That was a great band. Yeah, he came down from Colorado, and he was part of that. Yeah, in fact, he and I actually had a few beers one night, became blood brothers.
Well, you have the best stories, Ray. Ray Wylie Hubbard is our guest.
The Michael Berry Show.
Friend of Willie Nelson and every Texan, Ray Wylie Hubbard is our guest. It's his birthday. I know Willie thinks the world of you, and I'm assuming Leon Russell was kind of weaving in and out of this group at some point.
Yeah, we, he was, Leon was, at back in those days when Willie had his picnic, Leon would sit in with everybody. And we went up there and did some stuff at the church. But yeah, Leon was just a great part of it too,
I think my favorite Robert Earl Keen story is about his car burning up, and he gets invited to come and meet Willie on his bus, but they're leaving to go jam with Leon Russell. And, all these years later, the Highwaymen recorded his song, so it all made it okay. Yeah,
it was just, like I say, Willie's picnic was just an incredible, pretty strange. But it was, there wasn't any, I'd play, and then also, I remember when Willie first time played Caesar's Palace in Lake Tahoe, he called me and said, "Hey man, you want to play Caesar's Palace with me?" And I said, "Yeah." And but anyhow, they said, well, they didn't have opening acts in the main room, so Willie said, "Well, why don't you play in the lounge?" So we set up in the lounge, and all these people were being lined to see Willie. Well, Willie was over on the side of the stage, sitting on an amp playing guitar with me. He said, "Don't tell anybody." They could have just come in the lounge and seen Willie right there.
Right.
But it was, there wasn't a lot of ego involved with, once you kind of became a member of the group,
Well, I've noticed with you, perhaps more than anybody else that I came in contact with through the RCC days and through chasing live music across the state, is there's no ego. Is that intentional, or is that just kind of your personality? Did you make a decision one day, hey, I don't want to be like that guy?
Well, it's a thing too. It all of a sudden, I think keeping my gratitude higher than my expectations, that's one thing. And then all of a sudden, really, it's writing these songs. Like I say, being also all of a sudden you write this song, and all of a sudden you say, "Man, this is a great song." And all of a sudden you walk into a club, and all of a sudden McMurtry goes, "Here's a song I wrote," and you go, "Oh," so it keeps you humble, among all the songwriters. So you couldn't get a big ego, because there was always Guy Towns or Billy Joe, writing these incredible songs. And one of the great things about it comes up and says, "Hey man, I like that little song." That was a gratitude. It wasn't an ego thing. It was a self-esteem thing that, hey man, I got Kevin Welch dug one of my songs,
Yeah. That makes sense. You mentioned Jerry Jeff Walker, and I know that y'all had quite the association. What did it do for you in '73 when he records Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother, which of course you'd written?
Well, it gave me a middle name. I was Ray Hubbard up before that, but then Bob Livingston on the album said this song is by Ray Wylie Hubbard. So all of a sudden, and Cherry's record label wanted to take that off the record because they said, well, if they hear this on the radio, they're going to think that's Ray Wylie Hubbard singing it. And Jerry goes, "I don't care, leave it on there." So for one thing, I got a middle name. Also, I was Ray Wylie Hubbard then. And at the time, it was out, and that was the only thing I was known for, Redneck Mother. I'd go to these old honky tonks, and I'd walk on stage, and they'd go, "Play Redneck Mother," and I'd play Redneck Mother, and I'd go, "Here's another." So, it was kind of not an albatross, but it was the only thing I was known for a while. And today, I still do it, but it's fun because I got a pretty strong arsenal, with Drunken Poets, Snake Farm, on Rock and Roll, and all
yes,
that.
you do. You have a very strong arsenal. I've told the story many times over the years. Ray Wylie Hubbard is our guest, by the way, of how you helped me get Tony Joe White. He wouldn't return our calls, and then he called you and said, "Who is this guy, Michael Berry, and why does he want me to come play his place, and what is it?" And you said, yes, you must play his place. And then I'm leaned against a wall, and somebody comes up and standing right over my shoulder, but hidden around the wall so nobody could see it, and you had driven in to see him play. And I asked you why he took your advice to heart like that, because that was quite a leap of faith, and you told a great story. Would you mind telling that again?
Well, remind me which story that was.
Well, I guess you were down and out, and you needed some cash, and he bought the remainder of your studio sessions.
Yeah, he was. Tony Joe just always. He was one of those guys like Jerry Jeff and Billy Joe who really respected other songwriters, And so I remember I called him. I think you called me and said, "Yeah, I'd sure like to get Tony Joe here." And I said, "Well, and he wouldn't answer. So I called Tony Joe. I said, "Tony Joe, there's this place down there, and around Houston, And I said, He said, "Well, I don't know about that." And I said, "No, man, I think you'll dig it, And so he said, "Okay, I'll do it then." Tony Joe was just one of those great cats. I'll tell you a great Tony Joe story. So Tony Joe is playing my Grit and Groove Festival. So he shows up, and Tony Joe was the first cat. We're just a guy and a drummer, before the white stripes or the black keys, guitar and drums. So Tony Joe shows up at my festival, and he's with this guy, and walking by me, and I go, "Hey, Tony Joe," he goes, "All good to be here." I said, "Who's this?" He said, "This is my drummer, Fleetwood." And I go, "Really?" I said, "How'd y'all meet?" He said, they both started laughing. He said, "Oh, I went to the institution, checked them out for the weekend. We just never been back."
I love the old great stories.
Yeah, so I mean, no, that's so. But yeah, Tony Joe, I remember. Yeah, that was really a thrill. And I said, "Yeah, if he plays, I want to come down and open for him." Got to hang out.
Well, it was very kind of you, and you and Mother Hubbard were very kind to us in landing us Uncle Lucius, your relationship to Kevin, who looks up to you, and Hayes Carl, and all these folks that looked up to you and her, and still do as the Godfather and the guy that could be trusted and the guy that would give them good advice. And you always said good things, and it opened a lot of doors for us. So a very happy birthday to you, Ray Wylie Hubbard.
Well, thank you very much.
We
Michael.
just love and
good to
adore
talk
you.
To you.
Here's to many, many more, my friend.
Hey, and I think we're going to be playing in Houston. I don't know where, but I think it's around December 4th or 5th with Shane Smith. We're opening for Shane Smith. So stay in touch with him, man. I'll put you on the guest list.
Yep.
And love to see you. I think it's around December 4th or 5th, one of those dates.
December 4th? Ramon says it's for 713 Music Hall, December 4th.
Okay, yeah. Well, come on, give me a call. We'll put you on the list. I'd like to hang out with you.
We'll be there, and we'll send our folks out to support you. Thank you, brother.
All right, take care, man. Adios.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building. Thank you and good night.